the last 25 years, I've had the privilege of interviewing and highlighting some truly interesting people. Everyone who is anyone, both the famous and the infamous. From presidents and their first ladies to kings and queens, movie stars and pop stars, captains of industry, heads of state, sports personalities, innovative entrepreneurs, and some pretty fascinating everyday people. Today, I'm proud to introduce you to Anna Smulowitz Schutz, a passionate artist who has acted in, directed, and produced over 150 plays in New England theater, in addition to her career in hospice at Brooksby Village in Peabody, Massachusetts. What a fascinating career, Anna. It's a pleasure to say hello to you. Let me just start by asking you what first drew you to the theater?
Seeing a play. I saw West Side Story when I was 12 in Louisville, Kentucky, where I grew up. And I don't remember ever closing my mouth the whole 2.5 hours. And all I could say is, please, please, when I grow up, let me do something like that.
So you were bitten right from a very early age.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I love that in reading more and more about you, I see that you've received some acclaim for your work on Terezin, Children of the Holocaust. Now, that is an extremely intense subject matter, but one that really and truly speaks to the heart of so many people. Can you tell me a little bit more about this production?
It's a play I wrote 50 years ago, and it premiered at Cincinnati's Playhouse in the Park.
Okay.
And I was a graduate student at University of Cincinnati. I wrote it as a thesis. I saw a letter in a museum of pictures and poems of the children of Terezin camp. And one of the notes said, if you should find this, please tell someone what happened. I want to go home. I want my life back. Please remember me. His name was Chaim Landau. He was 12. And he ended up in Auschwitz and died there. I sat down there at the museum and started writing the play on a garbage bag. And I use his name in the play so he knows we remembered him.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you, I can share with you that probably one of the most moving experiences of my entire life was having the opportunity to spend some time in Vad Vashem over in Israel. And really the rooms that impacted on me, the rooms that convey the atrocities are one thing, but going through the entire exhibit and seeing how that hate progressed, I think it impacted on my spirit in a way that I don't think I'll ever recover from. Because if we don't remember, we will continue to go down that same path. I have to imagine you feel the same way.
Well, I do. I do. My parents were in Auschwitz and Buchenwald, where they met. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and a sister were killed in Auschwitz. And I promised myself as a child, when I realized that my parents had these blue numbers on their arms, and my dad would say it's his phone number. He didn't want to forget it. My mother told me the truth of it. I just committed myself to going to Auschwitz one day and making peace with it. And I didn't know how I would do that, but I knew I was going to do that. And I was going to meet up with German people and tell them what happened. And I was, I guess, seeking for justice and some kind of deep apology. I don't even know what I was looking for at age 9, but I knew that was going to direct my life, my work, and it has. I'm an artist that uses social justice as a tool to tell a story and history, and so that it will never happen again. That is my whole
raison. If we don't bring our entire experience to the culture, then the culture, I think, is worse for the wear. And I'm just thinking about you and the message that you've tried to convey in this piece of work. Why do you think the message of Terezin is as important now than ever?
Because of what's going on now, the current climate globally, the rise of anti-Semitism, the rise of the issue of Black Lives Matter, hate crimes against Asians, all of this is going on today. And finally, we're bringing it to our consciousness as a society, I believe. And so the play has caught up with the times. And that's why it's been done every year for 50 years, because there's always, unfortunately, a hate crime somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And we continue to make the same mistakes that we have made for decades.
Absolutely. Centuries, really.
Yes, indeed.
Hate it didn't just be created in 1929 with Hitler, long before that.
Very much so.
And I'm always looking at that. And I also went to Yad Vashem, and there is a room dedicated to Terezin children. There were 16,000 of them, and 100 survived. And when we did my play at Terezin, 50 of those 100 came with their children.
What an honor.
And they were so grateful to be remembered. And they also showed me where they hid their drawings and writings in the cells. We all went and saw what they had done. So we just keep doing this. It's translated in German and Spanish. One of our most recent productions was in Cuba and Panama in Spanish. I just feel like it's a universal idea.
Yes.
And it's of its time.
Absolutely. And it's interesting to me thinking about what we've learned. One of the first things that society does when it's going down this path of hate and bigotry is to turn neighbor against neighbor and make us stop believing what the public square says, so that you are confused as to what's factual versus what is propaganda. And we certainly see that in our society right now.
What I see in kids, and that's one of my major audiences, students, middle school, high school, around the country, I see that no child is born a racist.
Yes,
they
ma'am.
have to be carefully taught. And they can be untaught because they can meet people who are unlike themselves and understand that we're all alike. We're all human. We all want to be loved. We all want to be safe. We have the same desires and goals. If we could just meet each other. On that note, I actually went to Germany 23 years ago and met the children of Nazi perpetrators.
Wow.
With 6 Holocaust, second generation. I was one of them. And it was a difficult week together. But it was an important dialogue about understanding our so-called enemies. And what I learned personally led me to my next profession, my next calling, which is I became a chaplain in hospitals.
And I want to get into your hospice work momentarily.
Okay.
But I'm just fascinated with how you have taken social justice and made it a part of your art. What other artistic projects have you been involved with over the course of your career?
Well, I have written a couple of plays and directed plays that deal with social justice. One of them was called Milliard Mass, about the factories and child labor in 1914 in New England. And kids were working 10, 12 hours a day, age 4. And that was wrong. And so I interviewed survivors of those factory strikes and fires. I interviewed their great-great-grandchildren, and we wrote this play and we produced it at our theater, the Firehouse Theater in Newburyport, Mass. And I was amazed at people's response to a story that's over 100 years old. The consciousness was raised there. The most recent play I did, socially, justice-wise, was called The Rememberer. And it was about the Native children that were kidnapped and taken to schools to have them erase their culture and their memory and their language. There's a play that's beautiful, written by Chief Seattle's great-great-granddaughter, who was kidnapped and taken to one of these schools, cross-country Seattle to Pennsylvania. These plays, for our kids, the actors, are extremely informative and powerful about the nature of justice and the possibility of making some kind of change in our culture. So this kind of thing is not tolerated ever again. That's what these plays do. They're a very powerful tool, in my opinion.
And it also seems as if, in some ways, the work that you're doing seeks reconciliation, so that people who would be, quote, natural enemies can understand each other, and that would not provide for a path for the same thing to happen again.
You know, you can never forget. You can forget, but you can never forget. You cannot ever allow what has gone to be dismissed. No one is off the hook. What happened, happened, and the crime is real.
Yes, ma'am.
But how we go on after that, how we live our lives, is, to me, the critical piece, because we have a right, the victims have a right to a good life. Mm-hmm. And I feel facing the story, in my case, the history of the Holocaust, is how I can go to the other side and find hope, hope for a better time and a better world.
And Anna, speaking of the other side, there is a flip side to you. You mentioned it briefly. In addition to your work as an artist, your work in hospice also brings you a great deal of satisfaction. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, it does. I was visiting my brother-in-law in New York. He had AIDS some years ago, 20 years ago. And a gentleman in the hallway asked me if I would come into his room and meet his roommate, whose family had rejected him. And I thought, okay, why not? And I went in, and the fellow was very ill, and he reached his hand out and he said, "Could you pray for me?" And I said, "Oh dear, what is your religion?" He said, "I'm Christian." I said, "Well, I'm Jewish. I don't know if it's going to count, but I'll try." And because I'm in theater, I sang a song from Godspell, Day by Day. And this is New York, and this guy was in Godspell on Broadway, coincidentally. And he was touched and grateful. And it was such a little thing to do. And it gave me such a sense of meaning and purpose. And that was years before I became a chaplain, but it was kind of a sign.
Yes.
And I remembered it. When the opportunity came, I knew it was right for me to do this and to go into hospice work. And I work at a beautiful place called Brooksby Village in Peabody. And there's a great deal of healing that goes on even at the end of life. And that's the work I do. And I couldn't have done it, I don't think, if I hadn't gone to Germany and faced my greatest fears. I don't think I could do this work without that work.
This is such vital work. As a matter of fact, I read that you went to considerable lengths to continue showing your work despite COVID. And I know we have all had to adjust to what we now call the new normal. Tell me how you were able to accomplish that.
My students, some of them, are in the play for 8 years. They start as little characters and they move up to the older characters. And I say to them, you can get out of the concentration camp. You could go do a musical, and they get so close to each other and feel the importance of the work in the schools that they don't leave. And the oldest member, 2 of them, Andrew Valianti and Katie Lowell, both of them came to me and said, "Look, we're graduated high school. I think we can direct this. We're going to make it into a film." This is last year. Wow. And I said, "How?" And they said, "We'll find the money, we'll find the place, and we'll isolate, and we'll get COVID, shots, we'll be okay." So they took it on. I had nothing to do with it except for having taught them for 10 years. And they directed this beautiful film that now is being distributed to the schools. It is very affordable. I mean, it even played in Cambodia.
Fantastic.
This year. It's just extraordinary. And there's a curriculum, and we send it out. And then I got back in by leading discussions on Zoom with students in Minnesota, Cambodia, Germany. We had students in Germany calling it. It was wonderful. And this play is now a film, and it is being distributed.
Where there is a will, there is a way. When there is inspiration from a teacher, I have to tell you, teachers are God's angels on earth, in my personal opinion.
We are.
Anna, what do you think the future holds for you and your work?
Well, this play, even though it's been 50 years, I think even long after me is going to continue because it's a powerful tool for eradicating hate. Theater transports you, and you forget where you are, and you go deep into the story of these children. I just wanted to name the website. It's terezin.org, and that's how one can read about what it has done, where it's been. I just want to continue it, and I'm looking for people who want to see the film in their schools around the country. We want to give it to them for free. We have to figure out how to do that. We're working on it, on grants and finding people to support us. That's what we're doing right now.
You know, I can't help but ask you this question because people define art in so many different ways. What does being an artist mean to you?
It's being allowed to share your fierce and unique and creative soul with those who would like to meet you at that place at the same time. It's finding like-minded artists and talented in music, dance, theater, art, writers, coming together and creating. It's just one of the most magnificent experiences of my life. And I am so grateful I found it.
I want to make sure that we include every bit of your passion in our interview today. So what is the one thing you would like the viewer of this video feature to walk away with?
This is a participation art, life itself. We all need to show up for each other. And we can do it any way we choose. But there are other people that need help, assistance, service. And we can find those people. They're everywhere. And I encourage people to open their minds and their hearts and their compassion to reach out to someone who is less fortunate than them and to help any way they can.
What wonderful sentiment that is. And I really want to thank you for sharing your passion today and just making me remember why passion is service. Once you find your passion, you have found your purpose. And it's pretty clear that you've had yours for a very long time. Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Star. Thanks for this opportunity.